Todd, if you can take a roll call for attendance, please.
Sure thing, sure thing. I'll begin roll call vote. I'll begin with Mr. Pete Driscoll,
Present.
Jim Barr,
Here.
Robert Rummer,
Here.
Eric Nayland,
Here.
and as it stands now, I believe Mr. Michael Gore is not present. So unless he pops up, I'll designate him as absent.
Yeah,
So
sure.
for
I think he said he wasn't able to join this week. So
He mentioned that, but just out of formality, I'll make sure it's for record that he is not present. Aside from that, all present and accounted for, sir.
all right, great. Well, first item, town planner report. If you have anything for us, Todd, or
I do. I have a few bits to report back. I did also chase down some additional information from our peer review engineer over at Niche Engineering, Mr. Stephen Ventresca. He's still about neck deep through the process now. He's about halfway done. I just sent him an email earlier on today, just inquiring to see if there's been any additional progress in light of the meeting that's taking place now. Received nothing yet. When I do receive that, I will be sure to share that with members of the board, and we can proceed from there. We do have some items back from Niche Engineering, but it's incomplete as of right now. So once we have some complete documentation, I'll be more than happy to share. Additionally, I have been chasing down some rabbits in terms of research for future warrant articles, bylaw revisions, and rules and regulations edits and revisions that we can make, as referenced in the past couple of meetings. We started with a pretty lengthy list of around 15 to 16, 17 if you want to be technical, areas of improvement for this season next year. And after we get a lot of the permitting items that we're currently chewing on now out of the way, I'd like to begin opening up some discussions for the adoption of, say, an 81Q provision for subdivisions within the town of Bolton for road maintenance, etc., held to the same standard as municipal roadways and public roadways. But I'll be sure to share that list with you in the notes that we have and correspondence we have from this meeting until next meeting. Given that we're not at full strength yet, it seemed kind of a little bit silly to share it now, given that the board's not at full strength to deliberate on said items and forge a path. Aside from that, we're doing quite well. Everything is going well. The items that need to be moving seem to be moving, even if it doesn't appear so. So aside from that, I don't have much else to report, aside from all's well.
okay, great. Thanks very much. Yeah, just I guess a question on what, maybe for my own clarification on what we did receive from Niche for Century Mill. So
Yes.
this is, the letter is related to just reading here, as-built street and profile plan.
Yes, that's the part of this that we don't, that's not completed yet, sir, if you don't mind me interrupting. We don't have the road plan completely complete, frankly, yet. We do have the first half, which is the subdivision completion. And we can put that one away for now, because as we've discussed previously, the board mentioned they wanted to prioritize road acceptance tasks sitting superior to any other subdivision completion task when it comes to allocation of resources towards completing. And that's the aspect of this peer review that's not released yet as of today.
Okay, so this, what we got was comments on the subdivision review, but not on the road.
Precisely. And once you receive that road acceptance, or once we receive the road component of this peer review, I'll be sure to share it and disseminate it amongst all the parties on the board.
Okay, makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Can I just interject a question here? What's a nitrogen easement?
A nitrogen easement, that there is related to, that's a BOH item. That's for nitrogen, as far as I'm aware, that relates to waste disposal and exhaust products from wastewater, or from wastewater.
Hmm.
in that system there. That's my understanding, but of course, I'm not the expert on nitrogen easements, as it were. I would definitely inquire with Randy Hegland. If you'd like me to chase that down, I'd be more than happy to.
I'm just curious. I didn't know anything about it.
Hmm. Oh, and also as part of my as part of the planner's report, please forgive, I did just receive a correspondence from Mr. Motha as of 43 minutes ago that he did submit the draft form of surety in a form of a covenant that of course requires review by town council. And surprisingly enough, it hasn't been reviewed and commented on by town council in the past 40 some minutes. So he elected to put in for a continuation until the next meeting, which is the 10th of May, in case anyone's curious. May 10th, May 24th. So
Okay.
that's hot off the press. We just received that.
Okay. Sounds good. Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll just take the items in order and then we can continue that one when we get to it. Okay. So on our agenda, the first item is an A&R for 190, excuse me, 191 and 199 Fox Run Road boundary line adjustment, assessors map 7B, parcels 134 and 133. Do we have anything on this? I don't see it seem to like.
Yes, it is. We do have a copy of the plan. It's on the current projects at the top of the other /A&R column. It is there, and I believe I did send it earlier, right shortly after receipt. I think that was a little less than a week ago, only a few days ago. It's a simple boundary line adjustment between two adjacent parcels, taking from one, giving from another. As you'll see on the plan that's set there at the top of the other /A&R column within the current projects tab. It's fairly straightforward. It meets all necessary requirements under revision. I don't have any further comments. Relatively, dare I say it, rather boring.
Yeah, let me just see if I can pull this up here.
Can you pull it up, Todd?
Yes, I can. Give me one quick second and I'll do that. Let me share my screen. I had it over here. Now this isn't it. This is actually for an item later on, but so if you head over to current projects, as I mentioned, at the top of the other /A&R, Fox Run Road, 7B 134 and change. You see it once it decides to pop up, it'll pop up here. There you are, sir. Is that visible enough?
See, yeah. So what's the change?
So the changes are occurring, if you can see my cursor here, between this line here, that's boundary line adjustment, as well as this boundary line adjustment. So one parcel is gaining access to this, the other is gaining access to the one on the right-hand side. Very simple.
Building a shed or something like that, it looks like, probably.
It doesn't have any further plans outlined in it. It's just a simple boundary line adjustment. So that's likely something due to follow,
Yeah.
but nothing's been filed quite yet.
Okay.
And we'll go back to, is everyone satisfied?
Yeah, I mean, it looked like it was a joint application from each of the owners of each of these parcels. Is that correct?
Yes, there are two applicants present. Well, on the application, I'm not quite certain if they're present within meeting. I didn't catch their names if they were present in the roster.
Yeah, no, I don't see anyone on the meeting, at least not right now. I guess my question just is, it doesn't really matter why. I guess it's just, but both property owners are okay with it, with this is my the point.
That's my presumption, yes.
Okay, well, I'd rather not presume.
Agreed.
Could we
I
confirm
was
that?
hoping that they'd be granted that if no action is taken on this after a very brief period of time, 30 days, it could likely go to constructive approval if we're not careful.
Well, are both property owners' names on the application
They are, sir.
and signed, I assume, so,
Yes, and within different handwriting and different endorsements. That's
yeah.
correct.
Okay,
So
okay
that's
then.
it.
Okay, yeah, I don't have any concerns other than just, you know, making sure everyone's aware and
See if there's anyone from here. Yeah, no one's recently arrived, as I see.
okay, well, I mean, I'm happy to entertain a motion, I guess.
Yeah, I will, if everyone's all right, I will stop the share here in a second.
Sure.
There we go. Oh, and if you recall, Pete, as you are the chair, you are empowered to endorse this A&R plan, or you can authorize me to do it. If you remember, several weeks ago, we empowered you to do so, to sign on behalf of the board.
Oh, okay, yeah, or if you can sign two, I mean, whatever's easy.
Yeah, the board empowered both you and I to perform that task. I just wanted to remind, if nothing else.
All right, well, so I guess I'll make a motion to approve the A&R for 191 and 191, 191 and 199 Fox Run Road. Assessors map 7B parcel number 134 and 133.
Second.
Very good. I'll begin a roll call vote. I'll begin with Chair Pete Driscoll,
Aye,
James Barr,
Aye.
Robert Romer,
Bye.
and Eric Nayland.
Aye.
With 4 out of 5, motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen.
okay. All right, now, first public hearing, which is continued scenic road shade tree hearing for lots 7, 8 on Meadow Road, assessors map 4D parcel 101. Have we heard anything from the applicant or their engineer since our last?
Yes, I'm so sorry to interrupt, sir. Yes, we have. We've received, we have a meeting arranged for a week from tomorrow to meet with not only the applicant's engineer, but also a more senior engineer from the engineering firm to go over possible engineering solutions that don't involve public infrastructure or private infrastructure within a public right of way. They haven't elucidated to me exactly what those solutions are, so I'm waiting with bated breath until Friday, next Friday.
Okay, so do they just want to keep this open and keep continuing it, or?
That's my understanding, given that at their appearance at the Board of Selectmen's meeting, I explained to members of the select board that we are keeping this hearing open, whilst they can come up with some kind of engineering solution that ticks all the necessary boxes and doesn't involve public infrastructure within town right of way. So they haven't communicated to me since, aside from setting up that early afternoon meeting a week from Friday. And after we have that meeting, I'm hoping that they can come back to us with a different permutation that addresses the issue.
Okay,
Are they going to provide, or I would request that they provide drainage calculations?
I believe they are. If you like,
Okay.
when I get back into the office tomorrow, I can reach out to Mr. Roy and Mr. Proctor to ensure that they have those prepared.
Okay.
So basically they have to figure out a way to move that drainage back. Like, I mean,
Effectively they have to engineer a solution to a very tricky circumstance. I haven't the foggiest idea if they've managed to come up with that solution yet or not. I don't know.
yeah.
It's tricky. No, for sure.
Yeah, no matter what you do, water goes downhill.
Yeah, right. Can I, so just on a single, on a driveway where it's going downhill and the water runs, I guess, just down, I don't know what you call it, like just off the road, a swale or sorts, if it goes down the driveway, hits the road, doesn't go onto the road, but basically continues downhill along the road. I mean, is that kind of a drainage structure? I mean, what would you call that?
No,
Huh?
Yeah, it would be just a drain, depending on the iteration it takes, it would just be a drainage structure, depending on the
Yeah.
exact details of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I think
again,
we've discussed that if it's a natural swale,
yeah,
Right.
without putting concrete or
Hmm.
culverts or anything in, it's fine, as long as it doesn't run into a wetlands. And that's
Mhm.
part two of the challenge in this particular place.
yes,
Right.
yes. It's
So because they have to build, a cement structure, then that's
bingo.
the concern. Yeah.
That's the installation that requires maintenance that 40 years down the line, it'll be hard to pin the responsibility on any one particular owner. And given that there's no adequate teeth there's no adequate teeth or enforcement mechanism built into that burden would then fall on the town sometime in the future.
Yeah, so, I mean, not the time for this discussion, but to your list that you started in the top of the meeting, figuring out a way to deal with these, like, multiple adjacent lots and ingress egress. I mean, that's just something to add to your list.
Yes, and once we get later on into the items contained on the agenda, those are some of the items that I've been trying to chase down with some of my planner colleagues to see if we can come up with a more neighborhood-centric approach to shared challenges like this. It's there
And Eric,
isn't
we did
an-
have that conversation with the contractor on 100 Meadow Road and pointed out that if the three adjacent lots had gotten together and worked out a common drive that went up a much more gradual slope behind the buildings, it would have made a whole lot more sense from a landscaping perspective as well as the.
Yeah, totally.
Oh yeah, agreed.
I mean, you guys probably weren't watching planning board or, but it's like when they were doing this, it was like they came before us with one or two, and then like a month later, they came forward with another one or two. It was like, I've said this before, but yeah, the whole thing needs to be discussed.
Yes, it's I've had that happen as well in similar municipalities where they kind of nibble at it like a bunch of fish testing at another fish. Until you look back and then 5 years later and 40 lots have been plugged in and they're all patchwork quilted together in a really suboptimal way. But
I think another lesson learned to me was going back over the documentation for lot 100 as well as these lots. And lot 100, which obviously is right driveway has been constructed and it's been a terrible challenge for everybody involved, that the driveway permit was signed off and the documentation for the alignment and the cut were part of the documents presented for that. And I think if somebody had looked at that more carefully from an engineering perspective, that driveway permit would have been rejected. It simply flat out does not work. It didn't work. And the contractor went to an enormous amount of effort to make the cut. And then, as he explained in an on-site meeting, get rid of the excavated soil. He talked about a number like $20,000 just to move the soil off the driveway.
Wow. Huh.
But if we caught it earlier, I think it would have been a much better conversation.
Agreed. And to this effect, I don't want to derail any conversations, but later on down in the agenda line, I do have a prepared document just of some possible action items for us to kind of chew on, and then kind of see which one we think is jumps out at us for prioritization for projects over the next year after some of the permitting items here are addressed. And then when we have a little bit of free time on our plate, then we can start working on those rules and reg revisions and warrant articles, fun stuff like that. The things that we're actually here for and to do, not just the boring permitting things in and out. But I'll show you that to you guys later on this evening.
Okay, so we're going to continue this hearing?
Yes, it'll be continued until the next hearing, because after that we have the meeting with them, as I mentioned, a week from this Friday. And then after that, hopefully they'll be able to have something to present as an alternative solution or amelioration. And if they do, fantastic. If they don't, we'll see. We'll have to go from there, I think.
So we need a motion to do that.
Correct.
So what's the date and time we're talking
May
about?
10th, 7 o'clock, 10th and
All right,
24th.
I'll make a motion to continue the hearing for the scenic road and shade tree for the assessors map 4D parcels 101 to May 10th, 7 p.m.
Second.
Very good. I'll begin a roll call vote. I'll begin with the chair, Pete,
Aye.
James,
Aye.
Bob,
Aye.
Eric.
All right,
Fantastic. With that motion carries, we'll push this item to the 10th. Hopefully we'll have something new. Very good. Thank you, John.
Okay, and the second public hearing is continued definitive subdivision plan for South Bolton Road, parcel 23, which you mentioned is once the applicant is requesting a continuance, I assume, to the next meeting, Todd, or
Yes, yes. So he said to the next meeting. I'm looking to see if we can have that item that was recently sent in the draft surety form over to town council to review in time, hopefully for the next meeting. Everything will really hinge upon how inundated town council is and whether or not they have time to review it. It's not exactly a sizable document. It's only 7 pages long, and it's even to a relative lay person like myself, it's relatively straightforward. That said, council still must review it. So until we have that review, I suggest we continue this until the next meeting on the 10th.
sure, that's fine with me. Unless anyone has any questions or comments, we take a motion to that effect.
all right. I'll move that we continue the definitive subdivision planning farmland open space plan residential development for Bolton Assessors Map 2C parcel 23. I'm sorry, what was the date that you stated?
Oh, May 10th, sir.
May 10th at what, 7:30?
7.
Oh, well, we just did May 10th at 7.
Oh, so we should do, remember, we're going by dates. We can have it at the second item on May 10th.
Okay, the second item on May 10th, sure.
Second.
Very good. I'll begin a roll call vote. I'll begin with Chair Pete,
Aye.
James,
Aye.
Bob,
Aye.
and Eric.
All right,
Fantastic. With that, motion carries. We'll see this item on the second item for the 10th of May at 7, a little after 7. Excellent. That's it. Okay, now moving on. Chair, it's up to you.
Yep, okay, so in our other business section of the agenda, so first item is a discussion of the light installation location at Century Mill. And I know there was some correspondence about this that I saw last week.
Yes,
It
there is.
seems like from my understanding is that, you know, there was at least the DPW director had said in an email that the developer had suggested moving it off out of town property onto subdivision land, and that alleviated his concerns. But I'm not sure if that is accurate or not, because I don't think we heard from the developer directly. So I assume that was a separate discussion with them, but I don't know.
That's correct. If you don't mind, I can fill in the blanks a little bit, Pete,
Sure,
if that's
sure.
okay. I did speak with Randy, our DPW director, about this very item. The fact that if the light is moved outside of the right of way, it becomes the responsibility of the HOA over within the subdivision in perpetuity, presumably, to pay the bill, to keep it lit. However, if it's kept within the right of way, it's still, we have an issue where we have another private piece of property within the public right of way as it stands now. And that also carries with it some other attached issues of obligation and liability. There's also another possible solution that was brought up to simply waive the installation of the light entirely. That's also an item. And each one of these, this is why I'm very glad this is the board making this decision, because each one carries with it pros and cons. And all of them are defensible within a statutory point of view. It really depends upon the board's prerogative and what they would see best within their wisdom. That's it.
I mean, they have the light. And
Correct.
I'm
Correct.
fine with it moved back. Do they have a position picked out?
There is a position picked out. The only caveat with having the light installed outside of the town right of way onto private property is that the HOA will then be responsible for paying for the illumination of that light, presumably in perpetuity. So even after those roads, let's look at this optimistically, all the roads are accepted and turned into public ways, that light is still on the subdivision's land. At that point, it would be the HOA's responsibility to pay for the illumination of that light, presumably in perpetuity. That might not make the residents of that subdivision all too keen on that option. As I mentioned, each one of these three options carry with it pros and cons, and it's really within the board's wisdom to decide what they think fits best.
I think the residents liked the idea of the light at the end, if I remember. And I gotta imagine one light divided by 45 is probably not that big of a bill. So I don't know. Have you heard? Well, I'm just saying, have you heard anything either way? I mean, I really don't care. I just want to get it done.
I have not heard anything either way. I do know that when I was speaking with Mr. Gore, our vice chair, he mentioned in passing in one of my correspondences that the prospect of piling this bill onto the residents of Century Mill would likely not be a very popular move. I do not want to speak for him, given that he's not present. That's not fair. So I really can't do any more than that. I remember that's just something to keep in mind, that the timbre of the residents' sentiment there might be a little cross if we were to just surprise them with an additional bill.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I really don't care either way. So like whatever they want, you know.
If I remember,
Subdivision?
One at a time.
Yeah, say it again, sir, one at a time.
Jim, go ahead.
if I remember correctly, the residents that lived around the area of the light did not want it at all.
That was outside the subdivision, but yeah.
Yeah, there was definitely, when we had the discussion a few years ago and eventually led to selecting this particular light with, input from whoever there was input from, there was a definite objection from, neighboring residents outside the subdivision, because they didn't want, a big high light on a big high street light on a pole illuminating the whole intersection. And the discussion was, around, well, do we really need that? Could we just have a smaller, kind of almost a lamppost type of thing that sort of helps, demarcate that there's a road there, but isn't really illuminating that. And that was what the decision was at the time. And I recall that we, that was discussed probably at a couple meetings. And I recall we had solicited some input from, other town departments, as we usually do, like the police and the fire department, and saying, well, from safety reasons, do you want, a street light or to find a road? And that wasn't a concern there. I don't remember if we consulted the DPW director at the time, who would have been previous to our current DPW director, possibly 2 DPW directors ago, right? Usually we do reach out to different town departments, police, fire, DPW, for things like that. And it's possible, and I don't know if we have records on this, but it's possible that the DPW director at the time had no issue with this particular solution. And now our DPW director says, well, if it's going to be a light on the town, town light on the right of way, it needs to be a tall, street light illuminating the whole area, which nobody wants. So, it's just, I think it's an unfortunate consequence of, that decision and discussion happened several years ago. I think it was 2018 or 2019 when we had that discussion and eventually came up to this light. And now, it's 4-5 years later, trying to get it installed, and there's changes and differences of opinion, right?
I mean, so like, what's there now? Is there anything?
No, sir. There's presently nothing there now,
All right, so
save just a stone wall, effectively.
Are there
Yeah.
other lights in the subdivision?
I
No,
believe
so
that-
there
yeah,
were, originally, and this is why everyone, the residents and the developer get so upset, is because going back to, when this subdivision was originally permitted 20 years ago, whenever it was, there were several streetlights throughout the subdivision. And eventually those all got, through multiple discussions of previous iterations of the planning board, they were all removed. And they just had this one at the entrance, which came up, in 2019 to actually figure out what it was. And there was debate about, should that be removed too? And, residents did felt like, originally they wanted to light up the sign, right? The Century Mill sign with,
yes,
kind of up,
Yep.
like tree lighting, but then that creates, uplighting creates light pollution. So there was objections to that. And this was kind of what was I might not be remembering perfectly, but this is kind of what was settled upon as, okay, let's not have uplighting. Let's not have a huge street light, but let's have something, more of kind of like a lamppost style that you'd have kind of at the end of the driveway, maybe a little more commercial than that. And that was,
if it hasn't been there for years now, is it worth arguing about?
right. I mean, it doesn't, there's no safety, there's no safety concern, right? It's not like accidents are happening every night at this intersection or anything like that, or, the police department or fire or even the DPW director is saying, okay, well, move this little thing on something that's no big deal. So it's not really a safety issue. So I mean, I personally don't have an objection to just saying, okay, we can remove the light altogether. The issue we're going to have, though, is the developer purchased the light based on the town telling him what light to get. And so what's going to happen is, that's going to be, oh, well, you need to reimburse me for this light.
Gotcha.
Which, I don't know what mechanism, if any, that's just going to come up, right? If we say, okay, which is fine, and maybe that's what we do. We just say, all right, we're just, it's like the current DPW director does not want a non, approved street light on town land that the town pays for. It seems like the residents, there was some objection to putting this on the subdivision property and having to pay for it and maintain it for perpetuity, even though they kind of would like a light at the entrance. So, maybe we waive the requirement to have a light there, and then, have to deal with whatever happens with that. I don't know what would, happen.
Todd, is there any feedback from public safety?
There has not been any feedback related directly to public safety. I do remember that the matter of public safety was discussed. Remember going through some of the minutes and some of the discussions that Randy Hagan, our DPW director, recalled from Design Review Board, just from TRB. That's one of the reasons I imagine that the formation of it kind of looks like a standard parking light where it directs directly down. So that would eliminate some of the light pollution. It was originally intended to serve as a utility pole, as you can see from the drawings themselves. It says utility/light pole. But what the light that was selected isn't really up to that task. It's not a utility pole. It's really just it's like a parking lot light. If you were to go to any random big box store and take a look at the lights that are present there, it's effectively one of those. So it's really not up to the task that it was intended for. It's really it's inadequate to the task. So the light that's there really doesn't serve as a utility or street pole. It's really just a
Well,
parking lot light.
I disagree with that a little bit, Todd, because maybe the original plan was to have, a utility pole with a light, but we did in, 2019 timeframe, whatever that was, this was kind of a compromise, right? Because there was so much objection from one of these huge, big streetlights illuminating the whole intersection, which would illuminate the whole intersection and probably would satisfy the current DPW director, but abutting residents were, really, the neighbors, right? They've been living on this quiet road. I mean, they're not happy about the subdivision anyway, but they don't want to see a huge street light outside their house. So it was kind of a compromise. And at the time, everyone who was involved in that, including the planning board, was fine with that. And if they had gone out the next week and installed the light, it would be installed, right? But now that it's been many, many years later, I think there's just some different voices. No one's fault, right? It's just people have different, opinions and perspectives. And so now it's that compromise that we made after, as Eric alluded to, many discussions, right? Is kind of not working now. So now we kind of have to figure out another way to, compromise on this issue, because nobody wants this, nobody wants that, and nobody wants it here, their kind of thing.
Understood. Thank you for providing context. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have some competing issues here. The original agreed upon location was on what would become town land, were the subdivision roads to be accepted. The whole purpose, as defined by the DRB, was as a locator for apparently public safety rather than, a major light post a la Danforth Lane, which is pretty big. So I think it gets down to, is this thing sufficient to act as a marker for public safety, and should it remain in the location it's in, or should it be eliminated?
Yeah, I mean, I guess at this point I would propose that we, move to eliminate the light, and maybe, just reach out to the, kind of do the same thing we did, a number of years ago, right? Where reach back out to developer, DPW, to, police and fire, and say, okay, well, now due to some objections, we just want to eliminate this light. It hasn't been there for years. The road's been there. Does anyone have a problem with that? And I know that developer from a cost perspective is probably going to have some issue with it, but if from a town side, that satisfies all the town departments, I don't have a real, but most roads in town are not illuminated, even at intersections, right? On the more, the less traveled, or the smaller roads, side road kind of thing. So,
Well, none of them down there are marked like that, so
right.
it would be consistent with that. So should we go to public safety, and I can't, perhaps DPW, and simply say, we've reviewed this and our recommendation is that the light be eliminated completely to be consistent with the rest of the intersections in that area, and leave it at that. If they come back with tremendous objections, we can reconsider it, but I sincerely doubt they will.
But I thought they already had, and that's why we're discussing this again, is because of the fact that when we did this the first time, both police and fire said they wanted to have some sort of a light there.
Well, and I think that we need to give them the opportunity to make that statement. The reason that the DPW came back was Randy believed that what was proposed to be installed was not consistent with the functional requirement that the DRB had specified. But, you know, I don't, we can accept that or not. I think it is important to get feedback from public safety. But again, stressing the fact that this is a beacon in a wilderness.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's, you know, that's a fine approach, and, you know, Todd, if you're able to kind of do that, you know, and get that feedback, you know, to say, hey, we're considering eliminating the light. Is there any objections, you know, to that? And if not, at least then from a town perspective, you know, currently, right, you know, everyone's on the same page, and, you know, I'd be comfortable to you know, to say, okay, let's eliminate the light. And there may be some, you know, some of the residents may say, well, we kind of like a light at the entrance, and developer might say, well, I've already bought the light, but, you know, just trying to get the town aligned, I guess, is the thing we have to do.
Todd, you're,
I saw it. I'd be more than happy to reach out to public safety and or DPW to see if they have any strong desires one way or the other, even though I doubt they'll have heavy opinions one way or the other. I'll just still reach out to all of them and then see if any of them happen to have misgivings about removing that light entirely. I'll share with the board.
Yeah, sure, that'd be good.
but I would carry the message that it is not consistent with intersections in that area of town.
Yes. I will make sure that's noted. Okay. All set.
Okay, yeah, hopefully we can put this issue to bed permanently soon. Okay. So the next and final item on the agenda is initial discussion of regulation and bylaw updates for next year. So I don't know, Todd, if you want to share with us some of your
Yes,
your
indeed.
thoughts.
Give me one quick second.
Todd, did you get that list of environmental and climate change proposed revisions to bylaws and regulations that Rebecca and her Clinton Bolton team had put together?
Yes, I do. I have that. Not immediately at hand. I have a whole other.
And there's
document
another
here.
list as well.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Give me one quick
And then
second.
there's our list.
There's, I won't call it voluminous, but there's plenty. So give me one quick second to fire up the, yes. All right. Okay, here we go. There we go. Hey, can you all see that well enough?
Yep.
Yeah.
Excellent. So just this is kind of a buffet of options, really. So I just want you guys to, we'll go over all these individually, and the ones that really jump at you as items of particular or highlighted importance that can be, we can use that kind of as a compass for the rest of the year. And then it also helps kind of narrow down some targets, and then we can start working on these sequentially, if that makes sense. So I'll just go to page 1. Bob, you might like this one. This one here is for the installation or creation of a tree protection or deforestation bylaw. That's something that is I've noticed has been of highlighted concern and interest, and it's also in resonance with Bolton's bucolic identity and its affinity for trees and tree fruit.
Todd, have you
Also-
looked at go-bys from other towns?
Just initially, given that there's so many here, I haven't had time to really get into the weeds, pun not intended, of all these items.
Yeah,
But
okay. That's fine.
we can work on that, yeah. Also, the second item is exploring the expansion of housing iterations, possibly to allow within a residential district the possibility of 2-unit structures by special permit, which is effectively duplex. As of right now, attached ADUs, accessory dwelling units, are allowed by right, provided they're attached, meaning that we already have the provision for a 1.5 unit structure, if you like to think about it that way. This here really just kind of makes that process a little bit more robust and allowing duplexes by right. The primary issue here, though, is preserving the form and neighborhood identity that currently exists. So we would need to do something, in my opinion, to have a form-based review or design review on whatever proposal they're looking to have, and also effectively rolling in the shared driveway aspect here. So that way you would eliminate the additional curb cut or punch in stone walls for that development. So that way, the idea is that if you're able to drive by it, you wouldn't know it just by looking at it that it happens to be a duplex. That's kind of the spirit of the bylaw, and it makes it a bit more continuous in terms of a neighborhood aesthetic. Something to think about.
Not that we need, now that we have our affordable, but I mean, would it be possible to allow it if you deeded one of the duplex units affordable? Like, do you do something like that?
Possibly. It's a little stickier when it's a duplex, because almost all, I mean, I happen to live in a duplex. I own both halves, and most landlords are also homeowners at the same time. And it's a little bit more difficult to require that
Yeah, understood.
above or beside that particular
And-
single. It's a little
And
difficult.
by nature, it would be, I'm just thinking housing diversity. By nature, it would be, I mean, you wouldn't build a McMansion duplex, so.
Exactly. So that's something that we can explore deeper, but typically it's a little it could be easily argued in a court that it would be an onerous or undue burden upon what would have otherwise been just a single family. They're not a professional landlord or renter or development nation. This is just a development company. This is just what would have otherwise been a single family looking for assistance or a mortgage helper, effectively. So, and
I
given
will
that we're
say,
already,
in the past, there's been a lot of, anytime a duplex has come up, I feel like the town has been against it, but it's definitely worth exploring. The other thing in this area, and maybe you can, I don't know if you've looked at it, like 5 years ago, we had a cottage overlay by a law that we put before the town that failed, which I don't think for like major region. I think the main reason, how things on the floor of a town meeting, I think the main concern was like people were worried about water, like, water depletion in a particular area because of a more dense living situation. But I really liked that bylaw that we wrote. So I think, if you took a look at it, I think that's probably something that we could, pull back out and clean it up. And I think it was a pretty good bylaw.
that could be a good place to start from. Exactly. The idea that density is part of best planning practice, even in bucolic areas like Bolton, for numerous reasons, but chief among them is both for road maintenance and plowing costs. Because if you think about it, if you have, let's say 100 units of housing within a 10-mile radius or in square mile radius, that's far more sparse than if you were to take that same number of units and concentrate them in on, say, half that amount of lateral space. Because of that, you'll have much less mileage of roadways to look after and maintain, fewer miles to plow, fewer miles to maintain. It's more efficient in the provision of services also. It's quicker for police and fire and EMS to arrive within a dense residential neighborhood than it is if those same amount of people were interspersed in a much, much less dense neighborhood. It's more efficient in general and also allows for greater swaths of open space, given that you have all the development or a larger chunk of that development within a smaller area that leaves fewer trees to be disturbed and less open space that would be torn down or degraded.
Right. So open space was a part of that. We gave bonuses for different things. I forget all the details of it, but
Yes,
just-
density
just get-
bonuses, yes.
yeah, just getting the diversity of housing, I think. Like I
Yes.
really like the Bolton Woods Way, and I know that, you know, there's a couple of, I mean, some people, that's what they can afford in Bolton, so.
Yeah, and the idea is to make communities in general more accepting and more diverse across all swaths and declensions, including income diversity as well. So we've done an exceptionally great job with subsidized housing inventory, especially with Alta Neshoba. That really put us, like I mentioned before, we're probably set for another generation, possibly
Yeah.
even two, depending on the rate of
Right.
development.
Yeah,
But
I mean, it's
just
great, it's
having-
great, it's great on that front, but to have like an area where there's smaller houses, you know, 2,000 square foot houses or something, I think that would be.
Yeah, starter houses are almost a thing of a romanticized past in a lot of markets, and that's
Right.
something that ought to be restored.
Mhm.
But that's a different thing for a different time.
But Todd, I think
Yes.
this is, no, I'm looking at the first four here. All of them fit very well into OSRD and what Harvard's doing.
Yes.
And I think, you know, different types of housing in the same location, multi-unit housing,
Mhm.
Open space, consideration of availability of water, inclusionary zoning, and just more open land, because a lot of people simply don't want to maintain a lot of land, but they want land.
Hmm.
They want land to which they have access.
Yes.
And I think that's something we need to step back and look at the big picture and say, okay, how do we do this without doing it in a piecemeal way, and anticipate what the next step would be as we implement a step.
Yes, agreed. And you're right, all these first four especially would be well fitting within a piece of regulation like that. If just in the sake of moving forward again, there's the consideration of implementing a bylaw for adaptive reuse of older and aged structures, being able to reuse existing standing structures that are underutilized or not quite meeting the potential that could be found within that structure. That's effectively the essence of adaptive reuse, especially for a municipality like Bolton that is on the older end, even for Massachusetts, when it comes to development and the presence of structures here. That might be something that would pique a lot of use and get a lot of interest.
Can you give an example of that?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask.
Say again?
Could you
Yeah, I
give an
was just gonna ask-
example of that off the top of your head?
Adaptive reuse would like be, we had a mill conversion overlay district in Hardwick, where I was working years and years ago. That mill conversion overlay district was designed to take advantage of some of the old mill structures that were present in town. Vestigial mills that they were cotton mills effectively that churned out uniforms for the Civil War all the way up to World War II. Pretty obviously, we don't need to be churning out wool uniforms much anymore. Because of that cotton mill closed down. And there have been several attempts to breathe life into that older structure and create different, more creative uses for it. Whether it was a mixed use with, say, a bar or restaurant on the bottom floor, some office space on the second floor, and some condominiums or loft apartments on the third floor. Something that really kind of is a well-rounded, diverse array of tenants. We don't have any mills that really jut out in the same level of importance, of course, but the whole essence is taking older structures and breathing new life and new use into them in a way that fits the neighborhood context. That's the spirit of it, really. And there's numerous iterations of different adaptive reuse bylaws woven throughout the state, and we can find one that I think will be a good fit for us and then tailor it to suit.
Well, I guess, we don't have any ancient mills, but we have large structures like Future Electronics.
Yes.
That is, although in an industrial area, strikes me as with a good architect and a good developer, and the authorization to make changes in its use could be a great center for a restaurant. Some of the stuff that we've seen in Maynard and other places where you have multi-use without really changing the character of the area.
Yes, and on top of that, Bob, should we get any entity that expresses interest in something like that after this adaptive reuse bylaw hopefully will be implemented, I can connect them with entities from Mass Development or Mass Economic Development Commission. There are plenty of places to find money to execute work in this sort of way. But that's not even, that's miles down the road from where we are now. But there are exciting elements to make projects like this not exactly a hope in a dream, but actually quite possible.
But I think if we have a solid vision of some way that this could be used, working toward that would be very helpful.
Yes, and if we can, of course, you can't write a bylaw for only one particular structure. No. But what we can do is we can create a vision. And from that, like you mentioned, something that's analogous with the spirit of the neighborhood, we can design that adaptive reuse to be more conducive to uses that the folks of Bolton would like and would appreciate.
But it would be good to get a conversation going with the EDC. I mean, Eric's here, about what that vision would be, not necessarily just for that structure, but for any structure in town, and then talk about how to put together something like that.
Yes, that could be done with a 40R overlay district. That's usually the easiest vehicle to enact changes like that. For example, we had, like I mentioned in Harvard, you have a mill conversion overlay district, which was designed and tailored to fit the adaptive reuse of mills, old mills, and converting them into new and more present uses. Like I mentioned there with that older knitting mill, there are several mills that are kind of yearning for attention, but we designed that 40R overlay district explicitly for that purpose. It was designed with that vehicle in mind, so we could easily do something that more befits Bolton and some of the older structures that need additional love and care.
Regretfully, all of our mills are just foundations now.
Regretfully, indeed. I love those. It's one of those and our stone walls are some of the things that makes New England amazing.
Our mills are 300 years old.
That's true.
And so moving on really quickly, I want to get into the weeds of these. However, I do want to make sure each of them gets some attention. We can, of course, give our existing Fosberg bylaw a little bit of I won't call it a facelift, but give it a little bit of a tune-up effectively. As it mentions here, we can consider adding density bonuses or requiring higher open space percentages. As you know, right now, 33% is required to be kept open. We could up that to another number. We could go as high as 50% or whichever else makes sense. We could also lower the amount of permissible usage of wetlands to be counted towards that open space. As you know, right now, only 25% of that 33% is permissible to have wetlands area count towards that. We could reduce or eliminate that entirely. There are ways that we can get closer to what the Fosberg vision was at its inception. And I think after seeing several Fosbergs take place over recent years, I think you guys are in a better place to really kind of tailor that to better suit the needs of Bolton. Moving on from there, of course, we have our ever-present and favorite shade tree and scenic roads hearings. I noticed that there's a flaw within the reference within Mass General Law. That's an easy administrative fix, but it still requires going through the bylaw revision process. Also, we can construct a specific application solely for shade tree and scenic roads, because scenic road consent, as of right now, doesn't have its own dedicated form. And as silly as it is, we really ought to have one that's solely used for that one specific vehicle, because it's different from all the other purposes and intents that the board usually processes. And we really should have one of those, but it requires a little bit of administrative work. But I do want to draw some attention to that shade tree and scenic road vehicle, because it's, I won't call it clunky, but it's certainly clumsier than it could be. And I think we should have some revision to that process there, but it requires going through the same period and same process as everything else. Continuing down on to another one, we have our issues of driveway and driveway permits. This one was left over from Valerie Ortiz. She mentioned considering the removal of the planning department review of driveway permits entirely and putting that within the purview of the Department of Public Works. That, of course, requires coordination and cooperation with the DPW. And of course, requires you folks to also kind of be in line with that too. Not for me to say.
I don't want to say I think the opposite, but maybe on single isolated single driveways, fine. But on contiguous lots, I mean, I think I don't know where we stand with state laws and stuff and
Mhm.
because it's separate owners, but maybe if it comes from a single owner and A&Rs, like
Mhm.
we talked about earlier in the meeting, I mean, there's got to be a way to
Mhm.
plan for ingress and egress and development of the land.
I mean, planning, what kind of board do you think this is, sir?
Yeah, exactly.
But yes,
So,
as I mentioned, this was left over from Valerie Ortiz's,
right.
Valerie Ortiz's kind of punch list of places to start from. Same thing with the one that follows next is modifying our existing parking requirement and maximums and including more nature-based solutions. That really is more of the like a multimodal kind of approach, requiring that new parking lots have room for, say, bike racks or for uh, other like e-bikes and fun thing like that that really require more space than is present and really needs to have a dedicated area for them to be stored, given that their usage is increasing nationwide. That's really kind of what that ties with.
I mean,
And
on the parking, I mean, just like I think within 5 years ago, we did change the parking, which was it was requiring a ton of parking. We tried to like minimize the parking required. So we tried to make it a little bit more dynamic and reduce to as little spots as possible, just to reduce the pavement. So
and if anywhere, and I'm sure Bob can speak to this extremely well, but reducing the amount of impervious surface is usually always a good idea, usually, when it comes to drainage concerns. But also it's just fitting with best planning practice to reduce reliance on cars as our sole means of transportation and getting from to and from, especially given that national trends are moving away from the 1950s era of everyone having a big wide Cadillac and a place to put 2 or 3 of them. It's really not quite conducive to the future period. And of course, I have some other following ideas that need to be done. These ones here are just to rules and regulations. These are items that we can adjust and revise with only a simple public hearing process. This isn't something that has to wait for town meeting or anything like that. We can do this entirely in-house, which is pretty great. We can amend our subdivision rules and regs, like I mentioned before, with the 81Q provision. That's requiring that while those roads are private, the developer must maintain salt and sand, etc., and plow to the same standard that public roads are at. We can't be onerous to them. We can't demand that they pave it with gold and have men with snow removal flamethrowers at all times. We can't do that, but we can require them to hold their roads that they're looking to, as they construct them, to the same standard that the people of Bolton hold their roads to. And we can also require that they have the obligation to install the mailboxes that are present. That was an item left over from Valerie Ortiz. I suppose there must have been a reason or an impetus for that to be there. I haven't heard any complaints about installation of mailboxes or the lack of that occurring, but it's something that we have the ability to require, and it's kind of a common sense item that we should have it. There's no reason not to. I don't know why. We can also clean up the A&R process forms also, because as of right now, our Form A isn't fantastic. There are plenty of places that it falls a little short. And also attached to that, we do need to update our fee schedule, especially given the rate of inflation that's occurred over the past previous 4 years, 3 to 4 years. Little things like postings and notifications of abutters. It costs us around $8 to $9 to send every single certified butter out, and we only collect 6 at application onset. And so over time, we're really not even treading water. We're starting to float down a little bit. And that's something that we have the power to address, and so we should. Moving on to the next one, there's also the FOSPERT application. We don't have a dedicated form solely for the FOSPERTs. We kind of reuse the same form that you'd use for a traditional subdivision. And that's not quite as accurate as I would like to see. I would like to see us actually generate its own relegated form. So that way it's kind of a separate but tied together process alongside traditional subdivisions. They still have to submit both, yes, but there should be a separate form for the FOSPERT program, kind of on its own to stand there. Let's see, I also have, again, scenic road and shade trees. There should be a separate application form for that consent, as I mentioned before. Aside from that, there's plenty of places to jump off from here. And there are plenty of places that we can kind of triage all these items. I don't expect to be able to bang all these items out in 1 year. That's ambitious, even for a chap like me. But we should at least triage these out and find the points that kind of that have the greatest need to be highlighted, and then we can that kind of sets up our workflow for the next year. We'll get to around this time next year. Does that make sense, guys?
Yeah, hey Todd, one thing you've talked about several times is fees, and I would
Yes.
agree completely with that. But I think we need to also talk about enforcement and fines.
Yes.
And right now, with the value of land in Bolton and the interest in development and the type of developer that we have bumped into, I think we need to be very, very serious about enforcement and have the teeth necessary to make people take notice.
That makes complete sense to me. Thank you for bringing that up. No, that's quite right. Thank you. So
Another thing that you could look at as part of the agricultural business bylaw, I forget the exact naming of it. The minimum acreage is,
yes, we should reduce that.
well, it's 20 acres.
Yeah.
So if there was a smaller farm that potentially somehow wanted to open up a restaurant or something like that, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of variables that go into that, but you know, we should look at that acreage and see if it makes sense to reduce it or not.
No, I
Yeah,
agree.
depending on what you're growing, 10 acres, you can grow everything necessary for farm to table.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. So if you have a 8 or 10 acre farm and you can't survive with that, and then all of a sudden it becomes, you know, whatever, 5 to 10 houses or something, I'd much rather it be a farm to table restaurant, you know?
Sure, absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Actually, that
Didn't we
sounds
say
good.
we needed restaurants and agriculture? Gee,
Right.
And we're also around dinner time. I can't be talking food right now, but I agree.
Yeah.
I do.
But yeah, so that 20 acres seems like it could be reduced.
yeah, it's a good list.
These are some of the items that I took from. There's a few here that are vestigial from Valerie's time here, but she brought up the need and highlighted that need, and then I added a few from my observations here and from me going over the regs we have on hand, and also some areas that I think are pretty good areas to really get started on, especially going over matters like the accessory dwelling unit. That's been far more popular than I would have at least thought at firsthand. And seeing the success of that and considering the fact that we have a population here in Bolton that is starting to age in place, which is excellent, we do need to find some housing iterations that are there to support that, which is one of the intents of the ADU bylaw presently. And considering the success of that, it seems like there's a palatability to expand that from a 1.5 kind of unit structure. That's what I like to think of accessory dwelling units, because they sit inferior to the superior structure, and going from there to just bump it up to an even 2, especially with housing prices the way they are and the way that we've seen some residential development. I think there's a market for that, and I think there's a palatability for that. But there's no way to know unless we give it a shot and see what happens.
On the one more thing on the phosphid and the density bonuses for more open space. I mean, that is, like I said, stuff that we did with the cottage bylaw. So maybe we can combine some of that, or maybe it doesn't make sense to combine it, but you know, definitely in that area, you know, it's a lot of different things we can delve into. Sure.
But I think an
Agreed.
overview of that from an open space residential development perspective would be really good to look at. Because
Right.
the stuff that's being proposed has a number of different types of housing, gets the design review board in from much more than simply reviewing structures, but looking at land layout and so forth. But you need
Yes.
a different set of skills and experience to do that, which is tricky.
Indeed.
And the big issue of by permit or by right gets to be tricky as well.
It does. It
Developers
does.
love by right. Planning boards like by permit, but
This is very true. But if you like, I can send this list to everyone on the board to have them kind of marinate on and see exactly the way they'd like to triage this or create a workflow out of them. Some items here are lower hanging fruit than others, notably the matters that just require a simple public hearing, these chaps here, the ones that are simply rules and regulations based. Anything else, of course, has to follow the standard bylaw review, bylaw revision process, which is, of course, as you guys know, much more onerous. But what I'll do is I'll go ahead and send this to you guys also, probably first thing when I get into the office tomorrow morning, and then maybe we can have you guys kind of take a look at that, think on it, marinate on it a little while, and then for next meeting, hopefully we'll be able to outline and triage these in a way that makes sense, and then that'll kind of be our North Star for most of our work going forward throughout the year. Does that make sense?
Yep. Hey, Todd, one other
Yes.
thing going back a bit that we had discussed in a hearing on CME was town council was going to put together a flow chart,
Mhm.
A roadmap of the overall development process.
Mhm.
And I think that and perhaps a couple of other roadmaps would be very, very useful. Because I
do
think
have,
you can read through the regulations and it's
yes,
all
I do. I'm so sorry about. I do have flow charts for ANR's subdivisions, both subdivision preliminary as well as subdivision detail. I do have those flow charts. I can scan them in and then make sure that I share them with everyone, if you like.
Could those be, I mean, are they sufficiently consistent with the Bolton process to be put up on the planning
yes,
board
these-
website?
Yes, these are.
I think that would
on
be
the town.
very
These are
useful.
for the town of Bolton. Yeah, I can absolutely put those on the town of Bolton website. Absolutely.
That'd be great.
Yeah, let me write that down so I don't forget it. Because if I don't write it down in my notebook here, it's likely to be gone. So
You're talking to a senior citizen who understands that.
well, give me a few decades, and I'll be happy if I can remember, where I live. We'll see. But, all right. If anyone has any other questions, this is why I'm here. So shoot away. Anything you got?
No, good job. Imposing but important list.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, this is really just I won't call it the lowest hanging fruit, but it's certainly the most glaring fruit that we need to work on. I'm sure there are other imperfections within regulation, as you always have. There is not a document that exists without flaws in it, and our zoning regs are not unique, but there are places of kind of easily improved areas, and these are some of the earliest places to start. And there's some areas within here that I think will have more bang for the buck in terms of impact. And I think we should kind of, as a board, you folks should really start narrowing down on which ones do we think will get the greatest impact for the amount of time that's invested. And then we can kind of triage down from there as we get these ones out of the way.
Yep.
All right. That's all I got for you. That's all I got for you guys.
No, this is great. Thanks very much, Todd.
Always.
Yeah, I think your suggestion to send this out and let us all think about it a little bit and think about priority or other things we have at, and then have another discussion at our next meeting. That'd be great.
Sure. And as one last kind of asterisk that I put on everything here, especially when it comes to expanding the housing iterations that are permissible within Bolton. There's within planning, I don't want to get in too much of a tangent. There's really kind of two schools of thought within a lot of planning, within a lot of planners. There's the use regulation and kind of like Euclidean zoning style. There's also what's called a form-based code, which really focuses on the appearance of the building and less so on the functions that occur within that building. Right. Whereas here, we're very much usage kind of driven, with aesthetics being kind of sitting second. So this is kind of a reversal of what we have presently. What I found and what continues to be amongst the best planning practices around that have worked the best tend to be a hybridization of both appearances and use. Rather than having one be 90-10 and the other being 10-90, these tend to be a little bit more balanced in their approach. There's different permutations within that balance, but especially when we start talking about bringing in design review for possible duplex additions or accessory dwelling units that are detached, like we have now. Once we get more into design review and focus on form rather than the functions that are occurring within it, then you get a little bit more creative with the usage that occurs within that structure. So from there, you'll be able to get more dense housing iterations that, while being more dense housing on onset because of the evaluation of the form of the structure, it looks invisible. The usage is invisible from the folks that live there nearby, and it blends in with the existing aesthetic, so it doesn't shock the neighborhood aesthetic much, if at all. There are balances to be found and to be struck within that, and as we explore that more, if we choose to do that, I'll be more than happy to share those with you.
Great.
And I think that would be very valuable to sell the product, as it were,
Hmm.
to the townspeople at town meeting and in regulation development.
Yes, and I'd be more than happy to speak to this effect because, as you guys have noticed, as soon as you get me talking about this, I very rarely shut up about it. So if you need someone to talk about it, I'd be more than happy to.
Just one note on our open positions. I mean, it doesn't look like we have another meeting before. Oh, I guess we do have another meeting before the town election. Are we gonna fill spots before the election? Or, I mean, because how does that work with the open? I think you were gonna look into that. Like,
Yes,
this is a spot that's up for election.
That's right. So I spoke with Pam over at the clerk's office, and she mentioned that if there is a candidate that launches a write-in campaign and they get enough to simply acquire the seat, then the seat is then filled in an elected capacity, so they'll be able to be there for the entirety of the term. If someone were to be appointed at that point, they would only be filling out the duration of the vacant term. So at that point, it wouldn't be all that long lasting at all. Pam recommended that if there is a candidate that would like to launch a write-in campaign, they're more than happy to do so. They're more than free to do so. And if that campaign is successful, then they'll be elected just like anyone else.
So should we hold off filling the full seat then and recommend that somebody does that and then just fill the associate, or are we just going to wait till after the election, or what are we going to do? Yeah,
That's certainly my view, Eric.
That's not my place to say, Eric. I can't.
What was that? What's your view, Robert? Just wait till after the election?
No, I think we should encourage them to set up a write-in vote. Because what can happen is that if they don't pursue that, somebody else can roll in and with 3 votes, become a member of the planning board. And
well, that's why I was saying, did we want to fill it beforehand, or just encourage one of those 3 that we met last time to do it?
Well, I personally think we should encourage them to go for a write-in vote.
Mm-hmm.
I think the problem is that we're not filling, if we go to the selectmen and say, well, could you appoint somebody? We're appointing somebody for a full term without an election. And that's really not a good idea.
No, understood. Yeah, okay. I think I see one of the candidates is on or was on. So I guess for everybody who met last week, if you're listening on video, whatever, I mean, it doesn't take much to go to Bolton Community, and I think you just have to give your name and address and say, fill me in. You know?
You have to also be a registered voter. Don't forget about that.
Yeah. Well,
and ideally, you have the best interest of Bolton at heart. That's kind of prerequisite, I think.
Hi, Austin.
Those are
good evening.
One of the ways that this has been done historically is to have somebody who is interested in that position have stickers appropriate distance from the polls, and having at least put a letter into the editor, be there with the stickers so that their name can't possibly be missed or misspelled. And that's a good way historically that's worked. I could ask the warden of the polls, who happens to also be my wife, about that, but she has informed me that's okay.
And Bob, that is true. When I ran for planning board over in Barry, it was also past the due date, and I put in for a write-in campaign, and I got myself and one of my friends who's threatened to put me on the ballot. I said, no, you won't. I called his bluff. The jerk actually freaking did it, and I was elected with 11 votes. 11. Yeah, it was. I was still mad at him 2 years later.
The people spoke.
But you have
Yeah,
to.
resoundingly. And after that, I lost my Tuesday nights. Yeah.
Anyway,
So yeah, I mean, Austin, if you're really interested,
Yeah.
if you're on the boat, there's avenues to get your name out there.
That sounds great. I'll definitely reach out and ask a little bit more about what you how you go about doing that. This would be my
Austin.
first. Yep.
Like, yeah, literally
Austin.
just,
I'm so sorry to interrupt, guys. I do happen to have a couple of pamphlets and information bits that go all through the ins and outs of what it means to be on the planning board and all the rights and responsibilities and all that boring but fun stuff. So if you want, you can just drop by my office and I'll be happy to share that with you.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you.
but I think for everybody interested, just sending a message on town community and even letter to the editor.
Yeah.
Just giving your name and address and saying, hey, I'm interested, write me in. You'll probably get more than 11.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds great.
Alrighty.
Is that it? We done?
Yeah, that's the end of the
Interesting.
agenda. So unless anyone has anything else they'd like to discuss,
Not for me.
we can adjourn.
Yeah, motion to adjourn.
seconded.
Very good. I'll begin a roll call vote. Let's see. Let's go with Jim first.
Bye.
Bob,
Aye.
Eric,
All right.
and just because I'm a Billy, you're going last, Pete. Pete,
Aye.
Pete,
very good. All present
have-
and voting. For,
you have one more meeting?
yeah.
I
Oh,
believe so, yeah. The first meeting in May is prior to the
That's right.
town
The
election.
election. All right.
and I will be sure to give you as much guff as I can in the interim. So I look forward to that.
We'll have your virtual going away cake then.
Sounds good.
Right. All right. Aside from that, I think we're all set.
All right,
Mr.
bye.
Chair, are we
Yep.
all set?
Yep.
Yeah,
Bye.
absolutely. Have a great night, everyone.
Bye.
Take
Thanks.
care, everyone. Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.